If you've ever considered or thought about going onto a podcast to talk about and share your beautiful children's book, or any book for that matter, this video is for you. And if you haven't, perhaps you should, because there are over 450 million podcast listeners worldwide, with 100 million listeners in the US alone, of which 1/3 listens to podcasts regularly. So the opportunities are huge. Hi there, I'm Eevi, an award-winning children's author and ghostwriter over on eevijones.com and the creator of Children's Book University. I create videos specifically for children's authors, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss my weekly videos. Just like with my previous social media series for us children's authors, where I shared with you how to make social media easier in order to share our beautiful book, what audiences to approach about our book, and what to share on social media, I really wanted to do something similar with podcasts. In that previous series, the two main reasons why I really urged fellow authors or soon-to-be authors to give social media a try were that 1, social media is absolutely free, and 2, social media gives us an opportunity to potentially reach hundreds of thousands of people we would never be able to reach otherwise, certainly not for free. And that is absolutely huge. So if you haven't watched my other social media videos yet, I have added the links in the description below. Personally, social media has been amazing for me. My business, my books, and my services over on Children's Book University. And so that's why I'm such a big advocate for making use of the different social media channels and media outlets, podcasts being one of them. So this video will look at why going on podcasts can be so beneficial to us in our children's books, what podcasts to approach so that they are a perfect match for us in our children's book, where to find these podcasts, and my 3 biggest ninja tips I could ever share with you when it comes to anything podcast related. So let's jump right in. Why is going on podcasts so beneficial to us and our children's book? Just like with social media like Instagram or TikTok, podcasts are usually free to use and appear on, and we can potentially reach an audience we otherwise would never be able to reach. But podcasts go so much further than that, so let's look at some additional advantages that you may have never considered before. Advantage number 1 is that there are so many podcasts out there. There are over 5 million already established podcasts and so many new ones that launch every single month. 2, many of these podcasts have an interview format, meaning the podcast host needs guests, which is why so many podcasts are actively looking for guests to be interviewed. And this in turn makes it much easier to land an interview here compared to other media outlets such as magazines or local radio stations. Advantage 3 is that many podcasts are niche-specific podcasts, meaning they are often very much tailored directly toward a specific audience. And this is big because this in turn gives us an opportunity to easily find and target audiences that would match perfectly with what we have to share, which in our case is our book. In contrast, the audience of any given radio station is a lot more random, and we never know who is actually listening because the audience usually doesn't have common interests besides perhaps their taste in music. 4, podcasts are evergreen, which gives them such a big advantage over so many other social media platforms. What does that mean? Most other social media platforms' content is pushed most when something first was posted, making each post less relevant the more time passes. Podcast episodes, on the other hand, are evergreen in that each episode will always be there and doesn't necessarily become less relevant with time. If you like to listen to podcasts, you may have experienced this as well. Every time I discover a new podcast that I like, I actually go back and listen to most of the previous episodes as well, while I'm waiting for the newest episode to drop. So even if an episode is months or even years old, people will still listen to it. In fact, I still get emails today from people that have listened to one of my interviews that I gave 1 or 2 years ago. The fifth amazing advantage of podcasts is that depending on the podcast, the host has already an established platform or audience. And whenever we appear on any given podcast, this host essentially lets us use this platform to share our message. And what I love so much about podcasts is that they are truly one of the only platforms where the audience is willing to listen to a complete stranger for an extended period of time. And that's because those listeners have already established a trust relationship to the host of that podcast. If we look at TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, the audience is so quick to keep scrolling and the attention span is simply not there, certainly not for strangers. With podcasts, on the other hand, the listener will spend 30 to 45 full minutes listening to our voice and our message. And that's almost unheard of in this day and age. And that's because podcast listeners are an audience that seeks out the hosts of podcasts. And that again is so big. Because can you imagine something better for a marketing strategy than to reach our ideal audience at the exact time they want to listen to us? For free is crazy. And finally, six, something many often forget about or disregard is that appearing on a podcast interview is a much smaller time investment because interviews are mainly only about 30 to 60 minutes long and are usually done from the comfort of our homes. So compared to any live events we would first have to travel to, this is a really big time saver as well as money saver because we don't have to travel and stay anywhere. And so all these things combined is what makes podcasts so perfect for us and our children's book. But what podcasts should we approach to ensure they are a perfect match for us and our children's book? So let's look at that next. Many aspiring and new authors concentrate on trying to appear on author-specific podcasts, meaning those that interview authors only and talk only about books. The problem with these types of podcasts is that those mainly cater to other authors. So the audience is simply other authors who are usually not there to learn about other books, but to talk about and promote their own. And I actually made a whole other video on author-centered marketing services like that, where I recommend trying to avoid such author services. So I'll make sure to add the link to that separate video in the description below. Instead, I like taking a completely different approach. Here we'll want to think strategically about this. I like to sit down and consider or think about two things. One, what general audience might be interested in my book? And two, what specific audience might be interested in my book? A more general audience would be anyone who usually purchases children's books. So that's oftentimes parents, grandparents, teachers, and other caregivers. So I ask myself, what podcasts might parents, moms, dads, and grandparents be listening to, whether that's for professional or recreational purposes. And a more specific audience would be an audience that is interested in our book's specific topic. A beautiful example I mentioned in some of my previous videos is one of my Children's Book University students' book about therapy dogs. Here we could ask ourselves what audience might be interested in that particular topic. So perhaps there are podcasts out there on different therapy methods or techniques, or perhaps there are podcasts specifically about therapy dogs or for therapy dog trainers. If there are entire podcasts dedicated to the making of sourdough bread, then I'm sure there are podcasts on this topic as well. If our story is about a dog or dog adoption, we can look at podcasts that cover that. We can even look at the specific breed of our book's dog and see if there are podcasts on any given breed. If our story is about breastfeeding, which again is one of the topics of one of my previous students, then perhaps there are lactation-themed podcasts or podcasts specifically for midwives. This really gives us an opportunity to think outside the box again. And this approach is different from the more author-centric podcast approach because now we are connecting directly with those audiences that are interested in the same topic-related things that our books are about. Now, having identified these different themes and angles, where can we now find podcasts that would align with these themes? There are many different ways we can go about this, so here are just a few. One, we can go and perform some good old Google searches. For example, we could search for more general phrases like top 100 podcasts for parents, for example. And we could niche this down by searching for top 100 podcasts for parents of toddlers. Or we could search for top 100 family podcasts or top 100 podcasts for teachers. The results will be much broader simply because the audience is much broader. 2, another great way to look for specific podcasts is to use a site like FeedSpot, a directory for podcasts, magazines, blogs, and so much more. Here we can simply start typing our more specific niche into their search bar and see what options appear on their site's drop-down menu. The reason places like FeedSpot are a great place to look for theme-specific podcasts is because not only do they show us a list of podcasts, but also the location of the podcast, which can be really helpful in connecting with the host, a short summary of the podcast, how many followers these podcasts have on the different social media platforms, when the podcast was first launched, how often a new episode is being published, the average length of each episode, and the podcast's website. FeedSpot is absolutely free to use, but it also has a paid premium option where it provides us with each podcast host's direct email address. And 3, another really great approach would be to look at fellow authors with perhaps similar books where we know they have done a number of author interviews, and then take a look at the specific podcasts they have been on. We can either do so via a simple Google search, or we can go directly to a podcast platform like iTunes or Spotify and put that author's name in the search bar and see what podcasts come up. So these are the main podcast finding methods I have been recommending over the years. Now, when it comes to finding the perfect podcasts, there are 4 main ninja tips I'd like to share with you that have really helped me get onto my own 3 dream podcasts. My ninja tip number 1 is to start small. It's really tempting to pitch to podcasts we know are really big and that we know have had other really big names appear on as interview guests. However, the biggest advice I can give is to start small, meaning it's always so much easier to pitch to smaller podcasts simply because they have a lot less people reach out to them. So the competition is a lot lower. We also want to start small because that gives us an opportunity to practice and hone in our message so we can truly shine once we get onto much bigger podcasts with a much bigger audience. And starting small also helps us essentially create a portfolio of appearances or interviews, which we then can mention when we are pitching a bigger podcast further down the road. My ninja tip number 2 is to start early with the identifying of potential podcasts. Don't wait with the identifying of these podcasts and their host until your book is done. Instead, identify them now, way in advance, and start following and interacting with those hosts on other social media platforms now. This is also something I mentioned in my social media series. So for example, even before reaching out to a podcast host, follow that person's work and their social media accounts. Start interacting with them not by messaging them, but by leaving thoughtful comments whenever they share their latest podcast episode, for example. That way they might actually recognize you or your name when you do reach out and pitch yourself. Another reason why we want to identify potential podcasts early is so that we can start listening to some of their episodes. And that again will help us personalize our pitch or first outreach message once we are ready to do so. And my ninja tip number 3 is to create an actual wish list of your dream podcasts you would like to appear on. This ninja tip is my favorite one because it has made such a big difference in what I do today. It may sound simple, but creating a wish list of your 3 to 5 main podcasts you wish to one day appear on gives you a true goal to work towards. When I created my list, I didn't do it as an author, but as an entrepreneur for my children's book university. So my list consisted of mainly business-related podcasts. But over the years, I was able to cross every single one of these podcasts off of my list. So creating that dream list gave me an actual goal to work towards. And while I received many no's in the very beginning, I listened to my own ninja tip number 1, started small, and then worked my way up. So over the years, I was able to share about Children's Book University on podcasts that had guests like Tony Robbins, Seth Godin, Tim Ferriss, and Gary Vaynerchuk, all giants within the entrepreneurial world. So I really hope that today's video was able to show you why we should consider making podcast interviews part of our marketing strategy for our children's books, and that it has inspired you to think about the podcasts you might want to appear on one day. The podcasting world is a beautiful one with so many amazing opportunities, so I am really looking forward to the next part in the series to help you make podcast interviews a part of your marketing strategy for your beautiful children's book. I hope you found this video really helpful in making your own list of podcasts to reach out to. Stay tuned for part 2. In the meantime, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't yet. It really encourages me to keep making free videos for you just like this one. Here's to your own beautiful list of podcasts. Bye.